what is your cost to maintain it, keep the system healthy over 10 or 20 or 30 years into the future. How do you go about handling those future costs at the time of sale? Walk us through your sales process, please. Who's involved? What are sort of the major steps? And then how do you go about pricing your projects?
Yep. And then from an installation perspective and an operational planning perspective, it's very, very important that measure twice and cut once is the philosophy of the day.
All right, welcome back to the Solar Surge podcast. Hey, if you're new to the Solar Surge podcast, on this program, we talk to the top CEOs and the top business and thought leaders in the solar and energy storage space. And in today's episode, I'm joined by David Inda, founder and CEO of Indaspec, and we're going to be talking about how to install solar and battery storage profitably. So David, nice to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Well, David, I think the context that we're having this conversation now, we're in California, it's early 2024. Last year was a doozy of a year for the industry, over 100 solar company bankruptcies. Big part of what contributed to that was the new net metering 3.0 rules where, homeowners no longer get a one-for-one solar buyback. And of course, as a result, sales are down for a number of the solar contractors. Not just here in California, but also across the country. Other factors like higher interest rates and fees have played into it as well. And so what we really want to do in this program is, I want to find out for the companies that are having success in this environment, that are growing and are profitable, what is it that they're doing that other contractors need to do if they want to survive and be able to continue to grow their business? So that's really what this program is about. I know you've done some really special things at Indaspec, and I'm really excited to hear more about it. But for those that don't know you, can you give a little bit about your background? How did you first get involved with solar?
Yeah, so back in 2012, I was part of a startup company called Burnham Energy, and we were working with the California CSI program. And so in the early days of solar in California, you were able to get PG&E and CPUC rebates for new installations. And so PG&E was tasked to find independent third-party auditors to inspect installed solar systems that were claiming for rebates. So myself and my partner Saul were part of a small startup company called Burnham Energy, and we started inspecting systems all over California and inevitably all over the United States. It was there that I, cut my teeth in solar. We were kind of writing the standards and creating the best quality standards that then third-party asset managers, third-party companies, started looking towards, and then transitioned into fleet asset management for a large third-party corporation. It was there that I started to identify the need for ongoing repair and maintenance, improved quality standards from initial installation and the sales process. And so ultimately led me to start Indaspec as a repair and maintenance company in residential and small commercial solar.
Interesting. So you started out not really installing new systems, but actually having to fix older systems that something had gone wrong, something had broken down. So I guess you probably had a different perspective than a lot of folks that have gotten into the business maybe more recently, where all they've known is the gold rush and the growth that we had during the 20 teens. And now we're having to kind of deal with a slightly different environment.
Yeah, that is correct. I think that from the perspective of purely solar sales, a lot of installers thought it was just an easy sell. We install new solar, everything's a retrofit, most electrical panels, most installations are cookie cutter, and that was it. And the life cycle was I sell it, sign a contract, we install it and get it PTO'd, and then we're done. When the reality is, and from the experience that myself and my partner have had with Indaspec and before, is that the life cycle of a solar system is the life of the solar system. So that's 20 years, that's 15 years. And ensuring that the system is working, is performing, and is maintained is what really lends to the ROI that was promised to those consumers. And, installers focus purely on sales and purely on growth, not thinking about having to ever go back and service those existing customers, is what I think has really hampered the industry and given us, in some circles, a bad reputation of, I was promised my solar would work and pay off, and it's never worked consistently, and it never paid off the way it was promised. And so I think that was one of the different approaches that we've taken with Indaspec.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's, one of the things we talk about all the time is, having that long-term perspective of, when you're talking about investing in solar, it's not a single one-time transaction. It's a multi-year, multi-decade relationship, partnership, and of course, having the right service provider, having the right contractor is a big decision. So I think if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is if you're a contractor and you're going to be involved in this business, you need to be thinking not only about what is your cost to install it today, but what is your cost to maintain it, keep the system healthy over 10 or 20 or 30 years into the future. How do you go about handling those future costs at the time of sale?
So in terms of handling the future costs and trying to think about operations and maintenance and repair and maintenance down in the long run, when we price solar, it's not necessarily for the cheapest installation or to just purely try to get the sale from the customer. The way we look at it is this is a 20-year relationship that we're building with our customer. And in that 20 years, the expectation is that we will return, whether it's installation related, manufacturers related, the homeowners change something electrically to their households that are going to result in us having to support that installation. And so when we think about solar installations, new solar systems, we have to account for the possibility of, going back to service the system. And we address that in two ways. Financially, we make sure that the system sale and installation is profitable. You have to make money in order to be around tomorrow to support your customer.
Sure.
And build a process to be able to service and respond to customer needs. Whereas we don't just have installers, we have technicians that are trained and well versed in how to troubleshoot, maintain, and repair systems so that we're not taking our only qualified electrician or only qualified troubleshooter. We're training all of our installers and our installer technicians to also be repair and maintenance teams. So at any one point, we can break away an individual and have them service a customer so they're not waiting 6 months or to wherever we're not busy, which is commonplace amongst other installers.
That's great. No, I remember that one of the biggest challenges I had as an installer, one of the first guys installing solar and storage on the East Coast, was that oftentimes when you had a service issue come up on a battery system, we had to pull our top technician off of the install crew and send him out to do service because he was the one best qualified to do the troubleshooting and the diagnostic and actually fix that defective system. The problem, of course, is now he's not installing a new system, which is actually what's bringing more income into the business. And so it can put a real financial strain on the contractor if you don't plan for that properly. So you train all your installers to be service technicians as well. Is that correct?
Correct. So the idea is the Indaspec training philosophy is not just about do as I say or follow the standard SOP. We create standard installation procedures for our teams based on the equipment that they're installing, and that's more for a QC standpoint. The real philosophy behind Indaspec's training model is everybody who is learning to install and is going to be on the electrical side of a system installation, whether it's an inverter or whether it's a battery, needs to learn how the system works, the science behind the equipment, and why we do things a certain way or why the code calls out certain items. Because that way you're not just teaching a laborer to mount a battery, you're explaining to them why the wire sizes are important, why the waterproofing is important, why the space requirements and the load calculations are important, because that lends them to, okay, now I know how this works, not just because I've been taught how to mount it. I know how it works, what the expectation of performance is. And so you can send any of our apprentices to a site and they will give you a good understanding of how the system works, because that's the intent. Because for us, it's the next man up. So we have our journeyman electricians and the apprentices below them, and either one of them is trained to understand how things work so that those apprentices will become journeymen, and the cycle kind of continues in terms of growth and being able to back each other up.
That's great. That's great. So education, training, helping the technician understand the big picture. Because, for a long time, especially when the industry was in that sort of super high growth mode, it was almost like a lot of companies had the attitude, it's like, hey, can you get on the roof? Okay, great. I'll make you a solar installer. And it wasn't, you're right, they didn't teach, a lot of companies didn't teach the theory behind it. It was more like plug this here, clip this here, follow the checklist without really understanding. And I know because I would speak to a lot of homeowners that were my clients and said, well, I talked to the installer. He said we could do this, this, and that. And the installer clearly didn't know, they didn't understand the engineering or the design behind the system, and sometimes could mislead homeowners with the wrong information.
Yep. And that's what we found is that the customer experience isn't just at the sales process or isn't just with the project manager. The customer experience goes through lending confidence throughout the entire process. And so if a customer comes out during an installation and asks one of the technicians, how does this work? What can I expect? And if they're misinformed or don't understand, then we start to lose a little bit of that confidence that we've built up in being chosen to construct their project. And so I think it's been very important for us in kind of reinforcing that customer service aspect and that consumer confidence side of it, is that they know that the people that are working on their system, which electrical systems in any house are very critical items, that the people that are working on it are trained and understand the ramifications of all of their actions and installation practices. So we found that from a sales perspective, a customer service perspective, and a general training and quality of installation perspective, it behooves us to make sure that we train these guys on the science and the theory behind how things work, and not fear that, because we're going to teach them, they're going to go somewhere else. The idea is that you keep feeding knowledge, and they're going to want to stick around and continue to learn and build their skill sets. And so we've been fortunate that we've been very successful at doing that with our teams.
Excellent, excellent. Now I know when we were chatting over at your facility, you gave me a quick tour of your warehouse this morning, and I'd like to learn more about your sales process, or share with the audience more about your sales process, because one of the things that impressed me was that you have a lot of technical input, professional technical input, before even the contract is signed. So walk us through your sales process, please. Who's involved? What are sort of the major steps? And then how do you go about pricing your projects?
Yep. We like to kind of reinforce our sales process as more of a learning and educational process with the consumer. So oftentimes when a consumer reaches out to us, or it comes to us via referral, they're already thinking about battery storage, or solar and battery storage, or a combination of electrification systems. And as they are thinking about this, the idea is to really get a true sense of what their expectations are. We get consumers that will say, I've been told that a single battery with some solar will eliminate my bill and it will back up everything. And so, at that point, you're like, okay, well, what is the goal here? The goal is to eliminate your bill and back up, or do you want to just eliminate your bill, or do you want to just do backup, or, a hybrid of both? And once you get to the true sense of what they're looking for, then the educational process starts of, okay, this is the capabilities of the various systems that we install. This is what solar can do for you. This is what battery storage can do for you. And these are the limitations or the pros and cons of each item to do that. And so our sales process really starts with an educational process. That is probably the longest initial conversation that I have with the consumer, is getting a sense of exactly what their goals are, and then educating them on the capabilities of various systems. We haven't even talked about price. We haven't even talked about what I recommend in terms of solar and storage. And then we follow that up with, okay, let's get a sense of your energy profile. Where are you using energy? Can we get the green button data exported? What are your future plans for electrification? Do you have an EV? Are you getting an EV? Get them a sense of, okay, based on your previous 12 months and then your future plans of upgrade, then we can model a solar system. Once we model the solar system, then we start to put in equivalents of, okay, how many batteries, how many solar. So all of this is happening with the various design software tools that we have in coordination with the homeowner. And the whole process can take days. It can take multiple calls. But the idea is that you're building a very comfortable rapport where you are the expert, that they are building confidence in. And I think that's the takeaway, is that you have to make sure that your customers are 100% confident that your recommendations are in the best interest of the customer, and not just you trying to sell the biggest solar or the most batteries. Half of my conversations with customers, and what our team does really well at, is talking to customers what they don't need. No, you don't need 10 batteries. No, you don't want to back up your electric vehicle when the power goes out. Heat pumps and AC systems have these limitations on your backup storage and what they can do. And so, once you get past all of that, then the presentation isn't really presenting them a system with cost. Now you're presenting a solution to the problems that we've dug out to say, okay, these are the problems you're trying to solve. This is the solution to that. And now here's your price. Those conversations often lend to physical site assessments because in any kind of electrical work where you're dealing with panels behind the wall, electrical circuits, older homes, reconfiguration, circuit relocations, there is no one price, fits all. Internally we have our pricing models that we say, circuit relocation per foot, different roof types and what the ramifications are, installation cost of that. That we can build internally, but from a customer's perspective, you can't just say it's $20,000 for a battery system and that's every single one. Because ultimately, you're either going to leave money on the table or you're going to overcharge where you shouldn't have to, and you could potentially lose that customer. So it's the educational process, it's the information vetting and the detail vetting, it's the site visits, after which point then the number that I present to the customer is the number they're going to pay. Because ultimately, from experience, from our expertise, the idea is that if we're creating change orders on you, then we're not capturing the information we should be capturing up front, because we don't like to surprise our customers, once the contract's already been signed or once the project's already started.
So it sounds like you have a very thorough needs analysis questionnaire or checklist that you go through. Does the sales professional do this, or does the engineer, the technician, who all's involved in the process?
So at Indaspec, we like to believe that our designers are the sales technicians. So when a pre-sale conversation starts to happen, you're talking to one of the electricians, you're talking to one of the designers, or you're talking to one of our senior technical project managers. And the idea here is that if you've come to us already, it's either by a good reference from another client or it's by reputation because we are very good at what we do. And in order to reinforce that, we want to make sure that they're talking to the right person about their project. So there's levels of technical aptitude required to have some of these conversations. Some sites are, I need a battery and I need solar. Other sites are new home construction with, 12 batteries and 4 generators, and how do we pre-wire for efficiency on a 1200 amp service. So we will make sure that those conversations get guided to the right people. But the idea is, constantly reinforcing confidence, expertise to the customer to make sure that they feel that, they're going to get their questions answered and be able to really reinforce the product that we're offering them.
I'm really glad you said that too, because one of the things when we were actively engaged in the solar sales business, direct sales to homeowners, we always called our salespeople system designers. We wanted them to know how to do the solar system design, how to pick the equipment, the components, not just how to sell solar. And a lot of that's asking the right questions too, and then knowing the capabilities and the limitations of the different equipment that's available. Now, what about for surveys? Do you do a lot of pre-sale surveys, or do you do your site surveys typically after a contract's been signed?
So we actually do 2 surveys. So there's a pre-sale survey that will allow us to make sure that we capture all the information to properly price the site. And then there is a post-sale survey that we call the construction site assessment. And that's where the electrician or the senior project manager that's managing that project will get their eyes on site once the designs have been generated, to ensure that they know how to execute that design. Because one of the questions that I get asked by a number of installers and colleagues in the industry is, how do you manage to become profitable in battery storage sales, especially if it's only the battery and not the solar side of things, and its efficiency. So I rather pay for a construction manager to go on site for 30 minutes and draw out the real world as-built application as based on the single line diagrams and the plan sets, and have it down to the last fitting, to the last connector, to the exact length of number 4 out wire, then have a crew on site, and then realize that you don't have the right parts or pieces to complete that installation. And so the efficiency side is planning and prep will ensure that it's a 1-day install, it's a day and a half install, and then you meet your budgetary targets and ensure that you're efficient. And that's how you can make money doing batteries and installing batteries only.
Yeah, I actually have some commentary I'd like to share on that too, because I remember one of the things when I was in the installation business, one of the things that was most costly is when you had a crew already mobilized, right? And especially if you're doing a battery installation, so typically you have your more highly trained guys already mobilized just to find out there's a small part that you're missing that you need to complete the install. And that absolutely kills you as a contractor when you have 4 or 5 guys that are on the clock, cannot be productive because there was a detail that was missed during the planning or during the equipping process. So having that sort of two-level surveys to me makes a lot of sense. Some people might say, well, there's a lot of cost involved in that, and you're doing survey before you even have a signed contract. Well, if you balance that against what's the cost of not being able to do the install and still having to pay your guys for that day or for that half day, I guess in the big picture, it actually makes sense.
And I think a lot of it is that in solar sales, it became very easy to remote sell a system because the technology has gotten so good with remote site assessment tools, with LiDAR modeling, that you can model a solar system on a roof and know that your point of connection was a single breaker and you're installing an 8 kilowatt system. That is pretty straightforward, and there's very few pitfalls that you run into with that, minus the age of the roof, and I know a lot of installers get in trouble for that. But in battery storage in particular, everything's on the side of the wall or inside the wall or in a place that you cannot see. And the difference between installing batteries 10 feet from the main panel or 50 feet from the main panel because of where the layout is a matter of days, and it's a matter of hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, of uncaptured costs if you're not pricing the site accordingly. So, I've been told many times, like, if you're sending people on site, doesn't that cost you money? And it's like, yes, it does cost money, but it's saving you so much more on the efficiency side. Because like you said, if I have 4 guys mobilized and they realize that the single line site put the batteries next to the main panel, but you can't do that anymore, they don't have the material to make the adjustment. Now we can't finish the job, and then it's another day of doing work, and you're losing, all of your margin goes down when you have to mobilize for a second day or a third day. And so it's trying to optimize the design and the construction planning process to ensure that when we're on site, it's efficient, it's clean, they have everything that they need. And then from a customer perspective, we go back to the same thing. It reinforces credibility because they're like, man, these guys have everything they need. They didn't leave. They told me a day and a half. It's a day and a half. And, they told me 4 hours of power was out. That's all the power. That's as long as the power was out, and the system gets commissioned and installed. I can tell you from experience and helping other installers and talking to other customers with various experiences with other battery installers, that isn't common, to say, oh, we're going to take 2 days to install, and then a week and a half later, they still have an open main panel and circuits hanging out.
Yeah, for battery systems, we see it all the time, unfortunately. But again, that's why we're doing this interview here, is to kind of share this experience with you. What it sounds like you're saying is, hey, a little bit of investment of time and planning up front, double survey to make sure that what is the final survey, the final plan set is actually going to be able to be installed. And then that when it does come to install day, they get in and out smoothly, just like we're used to doing grid tie only, glass on the roof.
Yep.
So David, okay, we talked about the sales process. Now, how does the engineering and plan review process differ when you're talking about installing solar with battery storage compared to just solar only?
So I think one of the biggest differentiations between adding battery storage to a project is the amount of variability in the technical layout of wire, conduit, battery location. Because in most modern day solar systems, you have generally one size of wire coming off the roof and a single point of connection. And whether it's a combiner panel or whether it's some monitoring systems, it's generally a single breaker. In battery systems, you're dealing with backup loads panels, non-backed up loads panels, wire sizing, wire relocation. So you're triggering a lot of the NEC code, and you're triggering a lot of the fire requirements for the state fire requirements with setbacks and spacing between batteries and distance between windows and doors. And so if you don't thoroughly evaluate your design plan set once it comes in from the engineering team and ensure that we've hit all of the marks required by the various jurisdictions, you can run into problems, because the last thing you want to do is install a battery, finish the system, and then have an inspector tell you that you have to move it 4 feet. And so part of the combination of the construction site assessment and the engineering plan review is to ensure that the electrician that's going to lead the project understands what is asked of him of the AHJ and understands, the application of those codes and those setbacks, so that, when he goes on site to validate that we can actually build it, that the plans are correct. Because every once in a while there'll be incorrect wire size, There'll be wire counts in a raceway that don't get caught because a lot of engineering teams use templates, whether it's a third-party engineering team or in-house engineering team. And so building department reviews, especially those that don't do actual review but they do it on site, can get you in a lot of trouble if you're not sizing wire sizes appropriately or putting the wires in the right place. So having a thorough review in-house before construction happens will help alleviate some of those problems.
Okay, David, that makes sense. So between the construction site assessment and then once you have done your engineering plan review, so by the time you have your permit issued, you pretty much know 100% what's on here is going to be able to be installed, right? You're not going to have to make a game day audible.
And that's the idea, is we want to avoid audibles at all costs, because that is where the cost happens. If you're interconnecting with a lug kit versus a breaker, that's a $500 change in material. If you're relocating batteries, from 10 feet to 20 feet, that's a $1,000 change in labor, material, and manpower. Not to mention the customer service experience and, changing the layout to what they're expecting. So being able to have the team confidently go on site to know that they know exactly how to build, what's the plan, will make it so that you have an efficient install and everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do the day that they're on site, as opposed to guessing of, we'll figure it out when we open the wall, or we'll figure it out once we get there. You could do that a little bit in solar. You cannot do that in battery storage and electrification of homes.
All right. So let's talk more about the makeup of the install crew itself. Can you tell me a solar only job versus a solar with, say, whole house battery backup job? How do the installation crews differ in terms of manpower, equipment, vehicles? Kind of paint a picture for us.
Sure. So Indaspec has two distinct business sides. We have our roofing division, and then we have our electrical division. So on the roofing side, anytime that Indaspec is touching the roof, stanchions, repairs, anything with penetrating the roof, we make sure that we have the trained professionals to do that work. Because in our O&M history, nothing is more costly than a roof leak. And the guys who know how to work on the roof are the roofers. And so the way that our solar only teams are generally 2 roofers and 1 journeyman electrician. And the 2 roofers are doing all the roof mounts, the rails, the racking, get it to the point where it's panel ready. The journeyman is pre-piping to the main panel, gets up to the roof, runs all the wire, the conduit, checks all the junction boxes, and then between the 3 of them, they mount the glass. So our solar crews generally consist of the 2 roofers and 1 journeyman electrician, and the idea is that we have the experts for the various trades on that project to make sure that they're where they need to be. The advantage of that, like I said, is roofers know how to walk on the roof. Roofers know how to move on the roof more effectively because of the experience that they have on a daily basis. And so the efficiency of that project actually goes up. So we can install solar much quicker with roofing support than we could by just having trained solar technicians. And our apprentice electricians or journeyman electricians finishing the electrical work and then supporting the roofers to slap the glass makes it so that things generally go a lot smoother and we don't have any return visits and the like. Battery crews, electrical panel crews, smart panel crews, those are electricians. Those generally consist of 2-man teams, and so it's the journeyman and the apprentice, and depending on the size of the project, how many batteries you carry on site, we may mobilize a second crew, so potentially up to 4 people on a battery site. What we found is less people, more days tends to do better than more people, less days. And the reason being is that when an electrician feels constrained by time, like I have to get the power turned back on, I have to get the system commissioned, that is generally a recipe for mistakes. And so by having electricians know that they have the time to install it properly, we just need less of them to do it, then over 2 days or a day and a half, we get a lot more consistent quality in the installation, a lot less callbacks from missed circuits or loose wire nuts, and it allows them to really go through the QC checklist of, okay, let's validate the system installation, let's ensure that the circuits are backed up that were designed to back up, and then we can test off-grid mode when batteries are involved. So that's generally how the teams are broken up.
Great. So David, I know one question a lot of contractors are trying to sort through is how wide of a service area, how far of a radius should they support from their home base? What do you do with your crews? How far will you go to do a solar and storage installation?
So generally, we cap it at about 30 to 45 minutes from our point of operation here in San Jose. And the idea is that in solar, if your system goes down, there's not very much critical infrastructure that's associated with it, so you can get to it eventually. In battery storage, that's not the case. If a battery system goes down and you're expecting backup when that, when you're expecting the need to have backup, the customer is going to have an expectation of quick service. So having a smaller geographic territory and building more density in that territory will allow you to be able to service and quickly respond to any issues with outages or system failures than you would need to do if you were just doing solar. So I think it's a very critical point to hammer down is that one bad experience with the battery solution, especially one that lasts multiple days because you can't get to it right away, will absolutely crush that customer experience. Because the batteries are tasked to do one thing and one thing only as the primary operation is to provide backup power to the home in the event of an outage. And you generally only have, in typical places, 3 to 4 times a year to prove that the system is worth the investment. So if it's not working or you can't get to it fast enough to ensure it is working when it needs to work, then you're going to have a very bad customer experience. So having a short territory and ensuring that you can respond and service those sites quickly is, I think, paramount to ensuring that you have a successful business.
Makes sense. And I guess you can maybe have a little bit better handle on the nuances of a smaller set of AHJs as opposed to trying to go around the whole state or the whole region.
That absolutely buys into it as well, yeah.
And so lastly, I would ask you, so what has been your experience working with the team at Franklin Whole Home?
Franklin has been great. We met with Franklin very early on, back in in Long Beach, I believe, and right away we identified kind of the pros that they bring, the experience that they bring to their product. There wasn't very many Tesla alternatives when Franklin came into the market, and there were few that tried to make similar products but never quite delivered. The Franklin team has put together a package that has been very resilient, very effective in what we've been trying to do to electrify homes and retrofit existing solar systems. The support that we receive from Franklin has been top-notch. We interact with their engineering team regularly on feedback for existing features, improvement of things that they can do, and general reliability of the product has been great. Franklin reliability has been very top-notch for us, and we've been able to compare their performance to a number of other battery systems that we've deployed. Indaspec has been very well-versed in the battery space over the last 3 years, from DC-coupled solutions to 48-volt power systems, to a number of different high-voltage AC battery systems. And because we have historical performance data from all of those systems, and we can benchmark Franklin to those systems, we've been very happy with the level of performance and reliability that we've received. And again, just overall the relationship, the support we receive from them as a company, from a marketing perspective, from insight into availability of product, and from tech support has also been very good.
That's great. And this is probably a great time to acknowledge and recognize Franklin as today's video sponsor. The reason that we're producing this series of videos is because Franklin has recognized that this is a partnership. And in order for them to be successful as an equipment manufacturer, their installation contractor partners have to be successful as well. And me, as a former installer, and I still carry an electrician's license in a couple of states, I know that there's a number of contractors out there that are struggling to figure this battery thing out. And that's why I want to make sure that companies like yours and what you've learned and what you've been able to apply to be successful, that others can benefit from that as well. So we thank the team at Franklin for sponsoring today's video so that we can get this information out to the marketplace. Well, David, I really enjoyed our talk so far. Is there anything else that the audience should know, particularly contractors that are watching out there, that they should know about having a successful solar and battery installation business?
Expectations are key. Establishing realistic, real-world expectations, educating your customers as to what they should expect with the battery systems. One of the number one takeaways that I tell other contractors is the very first thing you need to inform your customers is batteries don't create more power. Batteries shift how you use power. And I think that's a takeaway that a lot of customers don't really understand is like, I'm going to get a battery and automatically we're going to save more money. So that I think that's an important concept to get across in the very beginning. And then from an installation perspective and an operational planning perspective, it's very, very important that measure twice and cut once is the philosophy of the day. Because by QCing your designs, by ensuring that you visited the site, by making sure that all the materials available to your install teams and there's absolutely no changes in the field, you will succeed and you will do well. If you don't plan for projects correctly, you're going to run into problems. And unlike solar, battery change order problems are very, very expensive. And so, in order to be efficient with battery solutions and do well, you have to make sure that you're as efficient as possible in the field and you minimize changes once the designs have been created.
So folks, this has been an interview with David Inda, CEO and founder of Indaspec Energy Solutions, and we've been talking about how to install batteries profitably. If you're in the solar installation business or you're a solar professional, make sure you get subscribed to the Solar Surge podcast, because we're going to have guests like David on sharing their knowledge, wisdom, and experience and what they're doing to be successful in their business so that you can implement some of these in your business as well. Well, folks, that pretty much does it for today's episode. I thank you for spending some more time with Solar Surge. And as always, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.